Some of the rarest Washington quarters have shocked collectors with jaw-dropping auction prices, turning ordinary-looking coins into life-changing treasures. From minting mistakes to special varieties, these coins hide incredible secrets. The 1983 Washington quarter dollar. Imagine this for a second. You're sitting at home, sorting through some spare change, not expecting much, when suddenly you realize that one ordinary-looking quarter in your hand could be worth not just a few cents, not even a few $100s, but tens of thousands of dollars. Yes, you heard that right. A single coin from your pocket, one that most people would spend without thinking twice, has been known to sell at auction for, and in some cases even pushing close to now, that's not just pocket change, that's life-changing money. To understand why the 1983 Washington quarter dollar can fetch such staggering prices, we need to go back to the early 1980s. This was a period when the U.S. Mint was churning out billions of coins, and quality control was not always perfect. In fact, 1983 is a particularly interesting year in coin history because the Mint did not issue any official mint sets that year. That means collectors had to rely on circulation coins to find high-quality examples. And when there are no mint sets, that scarcity in top-condition coins instantly raises the stakes for anyone lucky enough to discover one in pristine shape. One of the most famous examples of the 1983 Washington quarter dollar sold at auction for more than $63,000. Another one, with even sharper details and higher grade, climbed above $66,000, and there are reports of some nearly flawless examples that collectors would pay close to $70,000 to own. Think about how incredible that is, just one small piece of change with a face value of 25 cents suddenly commanding the price of a brand new luxury car. What makes the 1983 Washington quarter dollar even more fascinating is that many of these coins circulated like normal quarters for years. They passed through countless hands, bought cups of coffee, paid for parking meters, sat forgotten in piggy banks, and rattled around in change jars. All the while, their true value remained hidden in plain sight, waiting for a sharp-eyed collector to recognize what they really were. That's the kind of story that fires up the imagination. Because if these coins could circulate for decades without being noticed, then who's to say you don't have one sitting in your own pocket right now? Collectors prize these coins not just for the error, but also for condition. The higher the grade, the higher the value. A 1983 Washington quarter dollar in worn circulated condition might bring in hundreds of dollars, sometimes even thousands depending on the severity of the doubling. But once you get into uncirculated territory with bright luster, no major scratches, and crisp detail, that's where the prices skyrocket. Coins graded MS65, MS66, or even higher are the ones that have stunned collectors, with sales hitting the $63,000 to $70,000 mark. So, when we talk about the value of this coin, it's not just about the money. Sure, the $63,000 to $70,000 price tag is jaw-dropping, but the real magic lies in the excitement, the possibility, and the history that comes with it. The 1983 Washington quarter dollar isn't just a coin, it's a symbol of hidden treasures waiting to be discovered. Now here's the big takeaway. If you ever come across a 1983 quarter, especially one from the Philadelphia Mint marked with a small p, take a very close look at the reverse side. Check the words carefully. If you see any signs of doubling letters that look doubled, shadows that shouldn't be there, you might just be looking at a six-figure coin. And if that coin is in pristine, uncirculated condition, you could be sitting on a piece worth as much as $70,000. The story of the 1965 Washington quarter dollar is one of the most fascinating tales in modern American coinage, because hidden in this year lies one of the most exciting error coins ever discovered. Imagine holding a coin that, at first glance, looks just like any ordinary Washington quarter from the mid-1960s, but in reality, it's a numismatic treasure worth not just hundreds, not just thousands, but sometimes up to $20,000 or even more. These rare error coins from 1965 are like time capsules from a turbulent moment in U.S. coin history. The 1965 Washington quarter came during a critical turning point for American coinage. Before 1965, quarters, dimes, and half dollars were made of 90% silver. But as silver prices began to rise in the early 1960s, the U.S. Treasury faced a serious problem. The cost of silver was getting dangerously close to the face value of the coins themselves. People began hoarding silver quarters, dimes, and half dollars, and very quickly, a national shortage of coins developed. To solve the crisis, the Mint made a historic decision. Starting in 1965, quarters would no longer be struck in silver. Instead, they would be minted in a brand new composition. But here's where things get interesting. The Mint was in such a rush to switch over to clad coinage that mistakes were inevitable. In the chaos of this transition, a very small number of 1965 quarters were accidentally struck on leftover 90% silver plankets intended for 1960 for dated quarters. These silver 1965 quarters are not only stunning to look at, but they are also extremely rare, with only a handful known to exist. Because of their rarity and historical significance, collectors have paid extraordinary amounts for them. Sometimes as much as $15,000 to $20,000, and in certain cases, even $25,000 when they appear at major auctions in pristine condition. Now, the silver error isn't the only rare variety from 1965. Another type of valuable mistake involves 1965 Washington quarters struck on other denominations' plankets. For example, there are known cases of 1965 quarters being struck on dime plankets, resulting in undersized coins missing part of the design. There are also examples of quarters struck on nickel plankets, and even on foreign coin blanks, since the mint was also striking coins for other countries at the time. These dramatic wrong planchet errors can also sell for thousands of dollars, depending on their condition and rarity. Each one is a fascinating glimpse into the mint's hectic production process over the years. Several of these rare 1965 silver quarters have surfaced at major auctions, and their values have shocked collectors every time. In one notable case, a high-grade example certified by a leading grading company sold for well over $15,000. Another, in pristine mint state, crossed the auction block for nearly $20,000. And when a truly exceptional specimen with brilliant luster and virtually no marks came to market, bidding went wild, pushing the final price to nearly $25,000. Just imagine paying $0.25 for something in 1965 and, decades later, discovering it's worth more than a brand new car. That's the dream of coin collecting, the thrill of finding hidden treasure in plain sight. What makes this even more exciting is the fact that these coins can still be discovered today. Unlike many older rarities that were snapped up by collectors generations ago, the 1965 Washington quarter-era coins were released into circulation, meaning they could be sitting unnoticed in coin jars, change drawers, or collections inherited from parents or grandparents. Every collector's dream is to stumble upon one of these elusive silver planchet errors, and that possibility keeps the hunt alive. Of course, not every 1965 quarter is valuable, and this is where knowledge becomes power. The overwhelming majority of 1965 quarters are the standard clad type, weighing 5.67 grams with no silver content. These are common and usually worth only face value unless they're in exceptionally high mint state condition, where they might bring a few dollars from a collector trying to complete a set. But if you find one that weighs closer to 6.25 grams, you may have hit the jackpot. Always keep a jeweler's scale handy if you're serious about coin hunting. That small detail of weight could make all the difference. We're talking about a coin that has shocked collectors at auctions with prices: the 1980 to D-era Washington quarter dollar, one of the most elusive and fascinating treasures in modern American coinage. Imagine holding a quarter in your hand. A coin so ordinary that most of us wouldn't think twice about tossing it into a vending machine or dropping it into a jar by the nightstand. Now imagine that very same quarter, unnoticed by millions of people, being worth not just a few cents more, not even a couple $100, but tens of thousands of dollars. The 1980 to Washington quarter was minted during a time of major change in U.S. coin production. It was the early 1980s, inflation was climbing, and the U.S. Mint was under pressure to streamline its operations. For the quarter dollar, a major decision was made in 1982 that would affect collectors for decades. The mint stopped producing proof sets and mint sets for circulation coins. This meant there were no official collector quality versions of the 1980 to quarters, making high-grade examples scarce right from the start. Combine that scarcity with the inevitable minting errors that occurred in the Denver Mint, and you get a recipe for a coin that can command life-changing sums today. One of the most famous errors of the 1980 to D Washington quarter involves coins struck on the wrong planchet. For those who might be new to coin collecting, a planchet is the blank metal disc used to strike a coin. During the early 1980s, the mint was striking nickels, dimes, quarters, and half dollars in quick succession. Occasionally, a planchet from one denomination would get mixed in with another, creating a dramatic mismatch. So, you can find 1980 to D quarters that were struck on a 5-cent nickel planchet or even on foreign coin plankets, making them incredibly valuable. These wrong planchet errors have sold for staggering amounts at auction, with some prices landing firmly in the $53,000 to $59,000 range. Another exciting variety of the 1980 to D Washington quarter is the double die. A double die error occurs when the die itself, the tool used to strike the coin's design, carries a misalignment or doubling of the image. When that double die strikes a blank planchet, the result is a coin with doubling visible in the details, whether it's Washington's eye, the date, or the lettering. Collectors absolutely love doubled dies, and the 1980 to D doubled die quarters are among the most desirable. Depending on the grade and how strong the doubling is, these coins can sell for thousands, tens of thousands, and yes, even into the $59,000 territory when conditions are right. But the story of the 1980 to D quarter doesn't stop with just wrong plankets and doubled dies. There are also coins with dramatic off-center strikes. An off-center strike happens when the planchet isn't aligned properly with the die. Instead of a perfectly centered coin, you get one where Washington's portrait is shifted, sometimes leaving blank crescent-shaped gaps on the surface. The more dramatic the off-center strike, the rarer the coin becomes. A perfectly misaligned error with strong detail can easily fetch thousands at auction, making it a dream find for anyone searching through rolls of quarters. Auction records back this up. In fact, one 1980 to D quarter struck on a wrong planchet shocked collectors when it sold for over $53,000 at a major auction house. Another example pushed past $55,000, and yet another, pristine in condition and carrying one of the most spectacular errors imaginable, reached a jaw-dropping $59,000. These aren't just stories or rumors, these are documented sales that prove just how rare and desirable these coins really are. Collectors also keep a sharp eye on the condition or grade of the coin. A heavily worn 1980 to D quarter with an error will still be valuable, but the higher the grade, the more dramatic the jump in value. Mint-state examples, especially those graded by professional services like PCGS or NGC, can multiply in value overnight. That's why serious collectors always encourage sending a potential treasure for professional grading. The elusive pieces and stories circulate of lucky individuals stumbling upon one in an old jar of coins or a forgotten roll from the bank. Today, we're diving into the story of the 1966-era Washington quarter dollar, one of the most fascinating and valuable quarters of the mid-20th century. And believe me, you'll want to stick around until the end because the value of these rare errors will absolutely shock you. The year 1966 was a turbulent time for U.S. coinage. Just 1 year prior, in 1965, the United States Mint made a massive change to the nation's coins. Silver had been rising in value, and the cost of producing silver dimes, quarters, and half dollars was quickly outpacing their face value. To fix this, the Mint removed silver from quarters and dimes entirely, replacing it with a copper-nickel-clad composition that's still used today. That's right, 1965 marked the first year that Washington quarters were no longer struck in 90% silver. Instead, the new clad quarters featured a pure copper core sandwiched between two layers of nickel, giving them a silvery appearance but without the intrinsic value of silver. By 1966, this transition was in full swing, and the Mint was under enormous pressure to strike millions of these new clad quarters. One of the most dramatic 1966-era Washington quarters is the wrong planchet strike. Imagine a 1966 quarter struck on a leftover silver planchet from 1964. At first glance, it might look just like a normal quarter, but when weighed, the difference is obvious. A clad quarter weighs about 5.67 grams, while a silver planchet quarter weighs 6.25 grams. This kind of mistake would only have happened in rare cases when leftover silver plankets remained in the machinery during the changeover period. If you happen to find one, you're holding a coin worth well over $10,000 and in pristine condition. Some examples have sold for over $19,000 or even pushing into the $24,000 to $28,000 range. But wrong plankets are just the beginning. Another class of highly collectible 1966-era quarters involves dramatic off-center strikes. Picture a quarter where George Washington's portrait is shifted dramatically to the side, leaving a blank crescent of metal visible on one edge. Off-center errors occur when the blank planchet isn't properly aligned with the dies. The more dramatic the off-center strike, say, 50% or more, the more valuable the coin becomes. A 1966 quarter with a major off-center strike can easily be worth hundreds, but when combined with high-grade preservation and dramatic eye appeal, prices soar into the thousands. But that's only scratching the surface. Another spectacular error on the 1966 Washington quarter dollar is the off-center strike. Imagine a coin where Washington's face is shifted noticeably to one side, leaving part of the coin blank, just flat metal. These kinds of errors occur when the planchet, the blank disc of metal, isn't seated properly in the press. The further off-center, the more dramatic and desirable the coin becomes. A small off-center, maybe 5 or 10%, might bring a few hundred. But when you get to 50% or more, where part of Washington's head is missing and the blank crescent is obvious, the value skyrockets. High-grade examples of 1966 Washington quarter dollar off-center strikes have been known to fetch thousands, with dramatic specimens breaking $20,000 or more. Now, let's talk about transitional errors, the kind of mistakes that come from the Mint accidentally using the wrong metal plankets. Remember, the quarter had just transitioned away from silver in 1965. Mistakes were bound to happen, and they did. Some 1966 Washington quarter dollars have been found struck on leftover silver blankets. That's right, an ordinary 1966 date, but instead of being clad copper-nickel, it struck on the old 90% silver blanks. These are exceptionally rare and highly sought after. Imagine finding a 1966 quarter that rings like silver and weighs 6.25 grams instead of 5.67. For collectors, this is like striking oil. At auction, these can bring staggering sums, with the finest known examples approaching $30,000 to $34,000, and in some cases even being estimated at $40,000 or more when in pristine mint state with strong luster. Collectors also chase the full brockage errors on the 1966 Washington quarter dollar. A brockage occurs when a struck coin gets stuck in the press and the next blank is struck against it instead of against the die. The result is a coin with a mirror image design on one side, pressed deep into the surface. These are visually stunning errors, almost like misprinted bills, and their rarity makes them incredibly valuable. A dramatic full brockage 1966 quarter in high grade could easily cross the $15,000 to $25,000 threshold, and with the right beer, even more. The 1979 D-era Washington quarter dollar is one of those coins that almost feels like a legend. Imagine holding in your hands what seems like just another quarter, a coin that countless people used to buy gas, groceries, or slip into an arcade machine back in the late 1970s, only to discover it's worth not just a few cents, not just a few dollars, but tens of thousands. That's the magic of this coin, and tonight we're going to dive into its incredible story. Because while most 1979 D quarters are ordinary pocket change, let's start with the world in 1979. The United States was going through tough economic times, high inflation, gasoline shortages, and a lot of uncertainty. Coins like the Washington quarter were circulating heavily. At the Denver Mint, marked with the D-Mint mark, millions upon millions of quarters were struck to meet the nation's demand for currency. These coins carried the familiar portrait of George Washington on the obverse and the eagle design on the reverse, just as they had since 1932. On the surface, nothing seemed extraordinary about these coins. They were made of the typical copper-nickel-clad composition introduced in 1965, an inner core of copper and outer layers of nickel giving them that silvery appearance. So, what makes them so valuable? For one, rarity. In coin collecting, rarity drives value more than almost anything else. When millions of coins exist in perfect, ordinary condition, they aren't exciting. But when only a handful contain an error, suddenly every collector wants one, and demand skyrockets. Among the 1979 D quarters, errors such as double dies, off-center strikes, broad strikes, and wrong planchette strikes are the most famous. Each of these errors transforms the coin into something one of a kind. Another dramatic error is the off-center strike. Picture a coin where George Washington's portrait isn't neatly centered, but pushed off to the side, leaving part of the planchette blank. The more dramatic the off-center, the higher the value. If you have one where the date is still visible and the strike is 50% off, you could be looking at thousands of dollars. Sometimes up to $10,000 or more just for this error alone. But the real heavy hitters, the ones that reach into that $32,000 to $40,000 range, are coins struck on the wrong planchette. Imagine a quarter that was never meant to be. Instead of being struck on a copper-nickel quarter blank, it was struck on a dime planchette, or even more incredible, on a planchette meant for a foreign coin. These wrong planchette errors are so rare that when they surface, collectors go wild. In auctions, they have fetched those astonishing five-figure sums, making them the ultimate prizes for error hunters. Let's not forget about condition. Even among rare errors, condition plays a massive role. A coin graded by PCGS or NGC in mint state condition will always bring a higher price than one that's worn from circulation. A 1979 D-era quarter in mint state with sharp details and a dramatic error is the kind of coin that can hit that $32,000 to $40,000 range we're talking about. Collectors are willing to pay a premium for a coin that not only has the error but also has survived in pristine condition for decades. Auction records prove the incredible value of these coins. A spectacular 1979 D quarter with a major wrong planchette error sold for over $35,000 at auction. Another with a dramatic off-center strike combined with full mint luster fetched close to $32,000. And in private sales, some collectors have paid up to $40,000 for the most eye-popping ones. These aren't just coins, they're pieces of history, factory mistakes that turned into rare treasures. The 1992 D-era Washington quarter dollar is exactly that kind of coin, an unassuming piece of metal that could secretly hold a value of or even an astounding at auction. Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating story of this rare and mysterious coin, a piece of modern American coinage history that has captivated collectors and continues to shock the numismatic world. So, if you think the coins rattling around in your change jar are worthless, stay with me until the end because what you're about to hear might make you rush to check every single 1990 quarter you've ever owned. The 1990 Washington quarter was part of the long-running series featuring George Washington on the obverse, first minted in 1932 to commemorate the bicentennial of Washington's birth. By 1992, the design was deeply familiar: John Flanagan's portrait of Washington on the front and the proud American eagle with wings outstretched on the reverse. Millions of these coins rolled off the presses at the Denver Mint that year, each with a small D mint mark just below the wreath on the obverse. To most people, every one of those quarters was identical. 25 cents of spending power, nothing more, nothing less. What makes the 1990 Washington quarter dollar so special? It comes down to the mint's transition between designs. In the early 1990s, the United States Mint was preparing for a massive change in coinage. Just a few years later, in 1999, the state quarter program would revolutionize collecting and send Americans scrambling to find all 50 designs. But even before that, small design modifications were already taking place. One of the most dramatic changes was the shift from the old reverse with the heraldic eagle to the experimental dies that hinted at new styles. In 1992, the Mint accidentally produced quarters with design mismatch. Proof dies being used on circulation strikes. Now let's talk about money because that's what really makes the 1990 Washington quarter dollar legendary. Imagine the thrill of a collector stumbling across one of these coins in pocket change, only to learn it's worth as much as a brand new luxury SUV. Auction records show staggering results for high-grade examples. In pristine condition, with sharp detail and no signs of wear, collectors have paid over $80,000 to secure one of these rarities. Some estimates suggest that in the right market, with the right beer, the coin could easily fetch between $83,000 and $86,000 and perhaps even break $90,000 if a bidding war erupted at auction. Think about that for a moment. One quarter worth more than 360,000 times its face value. The story of the 1990 Washington quarter dollar also highlights the importance of condition. A coin found in circulation might be worth thousands, but a coin preserved in pristine mint state, graded by professional services like PCGS or NGC, can command astronomical values. Collectors will pay a premium for sharp detail, flawless luster, and a coin that looks as fresh as the day it left the Denver Mint in 1992. That's why you'll hear of these coins selling for $83,000 or more in high grades because they combine extreme rarity with exceptional condition. Imagine walking into your local grocery store, pulling some change out of your pocket, and unknowingly handing over a small piece of history worth more than that. Might sound impossible, but for collectors, the 1980 Washington quarter dollar proves that this exact scenario isn't just a fantasy, it's real. Some of these rare coins have been discovered in circulation, casually mixed in with ordinary quarters, only to later stun the numismatic world by selling for jaw-dropping amounts. Now think about that for a moment, a coin that originally had a face value. The 1980 Washington quarter dollar was struck at the Denver Mint, one of the busiest U.S. mints during the 1980s. Millions upon millions of quarters rolled off the presses in 1984, and most of them were perfectly ordinary. They carried the same familiar design we've seen for decades. George Washington's bust on the obverse, designed by John Flanagan, and the eagle with outstretched wings on the reverse. At first glance, the 1980 Denver quarter doesn't look much different from the rest. But here's the secret: a handful of coins struck that year and Denver carried major mistakes. The kind of dramatic minting errors that transform a simple coin into a prize worth tens of thousands. But what really stuns collectors is not just the errors themselves, but the prices they bring. Consider this: in recent years, examples of the 1980 Washington quarter dollar in pristine mint condition, showcasing dramatic doubling or off-center strikes, have brought prices soaring past $60,000. Some auction results stunned the collecting world when bids crossed $63,000 and even nudged toward the $67,000 mark. For a coin that most people think of as nothing more than pocket change, those numbers are almost hard to believe, but they're real. And the rarity of these pieces means prices are unlikely to drop anytime soon. Auction houses and grading services also play a crucial role in shaping the legend of the 1980 Washington quarter dollar. When major auction houses like Heritage Auctions or Stack's Bowers list one of these coins, the collecting world takes notice. The publicity around such sales often drives prices even higher. as eager collectors battle it out for ownership of a coin that only a handful of people in the world will ever possess. Grading companies like PCGS and NGC authenticate and certify these coins, giving buyers the confidence to pay such staggering amounts. A high-grade certified example with dramatic doubling or off-center error is the perfect storm that pushes bids into the stratosphere. Auction records tell the story best. In recent years, rare 1980s era coins, including 1984 D quarters, have shocked the collecting world with their prices. Clean, dramatic, eye-catching examples have been listed with starting bids in the tens of thousands and have soared well beyond expectations. Collectors know they may never see another one like it, so when it hits the block, the bidding war begins. That's how we see prices leap to $75,000 or $77,000, with whispers of coins valued closer to $80,000 for the most extraordinary pieces. These are not just coins anymore, they're trophies, pieces of minting history that tell a story of chance and rarity.